Can you be a good person without believing in God?
Without believing in God? Ooh, that's a tricky one. Yes, of course they can. Many people do, and they find it very easy. But some people find it tricky and think that God will help them with it. That's fine for them.
Let's think about it. Well, has there ever been a single atheist who did something good in the world or something to help someone else? The answer, of course, is yes. So you can be good, meaning doing good things, even if you don't believe in God. But the real question is a bit different. Can you be good if there is no God at all? Well, isn't that the very same question?
So both of those questions are different, yes. One is based on belief and the other one is based on what is actually true in reality, whether we know it or not. But your first question, the one based on belief, is actually more accurate, and here's why. If God were real, the second question, nothing changes. If we find out tomorrow that God was actually real, we find definitive proof. We couldn't, but if we could, and we do, then nothing would change. So the question would still be up for debate, but it would be whether God is moral or not. And therefore, the whole thing would have no actual difference to our lives. I would still remain the way I do because I would not worship any of the religious gods. But if the god was found out to just be a generic god, one not of any current religion, then, it really depends. I'd have to learn a bit about him. On the other hand, the other one's based on belief. Now that's much more accurate because we can never prove God to exist. And even if we do, we couldn't prove it from religion. Because having the belief in these things would change the way you act in your life. It does seem to be funny how religion has much more of an effect than the actual god of the religion does.
You see, here's the tricky part. If there's no God, then how do we decide what's really good or bad? If God doesn't exist, then there aren't any clear universal rules about right or wrong.
You're right, there aren't any clear ways to right or wrong. Some things can be much more obvious than others. But things like the trolley problem still have people debating the answer today. The mere fact that people struggle to answer many different variations of the questions and yet haven't found an answer in any holy book is proof that there isn't really objective morality. Also, that's not just a problem for, atheists. It's a problem for you as well. Christians don't have an objective moral standard. The closest you come is 10 Commandments, as far as I could tell. If you can find more, then let me know. Pretty much everything else, maybe even including the 10 Commandments, is left to interpretation, which again people have different views on and don't always agree. And if you're going to say that's just humans being fallible, that's fine, but then there's still no clear moral law like you said there was. I find it strange that you instantly go from, if there's no God, how do we know what's right or wrong? The idea is that we're looking up at God as if we're puppies waiting for what the right answer is. But how do you know your master, in this case, or God, is actually good at all? I mean, at the very least, we can suggest that the devil has been made to deceive people. There's no way to tell that the Bible wasn't written by the devil, claiming to be God, giving us these moral standards that we should be living by. I mean, God gave us free will. Why did he take it away all of a sudden? The idea that we have to believe in him. Isn't that kind of strange in God's view of free will? And suddenly he's changed his mind. Doesn't that sound like deceitful behaviour? It might actually be the devil. He certainly has the capabilities to do that. That's his bloody job. So why are we presupposing that the Bible proves God and everything in it is morals when it could have been the devil? Even if there is an extremely tiny chance of that happening, there's no way to trust the Bible to find our morals. Even if we were to take all religious ideologies out of the mix, we don't know that if there's a being who created this universe is actually good at all.
Without God, there's nothing absolute that tells us how to act. It's like not having a rule book to play a certain game. Look, if there's no rule book, can you really be expected to play a game by the rules?
Of course you can. I absolutely loved the film Ready Player One, which was all about a quest to find Easter eggs, and you obtained them by playing the games against the rules. For example, the first one was a race, and everyone had been trying to do the race, many people, and it was chaos. It was brilliant, to be fair. But this one player decided to break the rules. Instead of going forward, he reversed. It's called exploring. I know it's weird that he was talking about games and I cited a movie, but the movie was about gaming. Anyway, to take this further, let's go into the idea of Minecraft, if anyone's ever played that game. So Minecraft is a game that pretty much literally doesn't have a rulebook. You can just play it however you want. And there are many people who debate whether you should play it in survival mode or creative mode, and they tell each other that it's not playing it right because they're not playing it the way they want to. It sounds like religion in real life, to be fair, the way people object their opinions onto others. But yet ultimately the game was there to entertain people, for people to find a way to play it themselves. Some people want to be creative and create massive pieces of artwork, and that's amazing. Some people want to put it in the hardest difficulty and find the most difficult challenge to overcome. Some people want to find a way to survive whilst also making it beautiful. Maybe Minecraft can teach us more about life than a religion can.
Imagine you and your friends can't agree on the rules of a game. Without rules, everyone just does what they think is best. But no one's idea is more right than anyone else's.
He sounds like someone who played Minecraft in survival mode and a creeper came up and blew up his house. And now he plays Minecraft in creative mode and tells people how wrong they are for playing it in survival mode. Quite frankly, what you were saying there sounds brilliant. There is no one right way to play games. Or Minecraft. Not even a linear game like Crash Bandicoots, the old versions anyway. And if you think there is only one way to play a specific game, then you're probably playing the games wrong. Most games are meant for replayability. Sometimes that does mean fairly similarly doing the same thing, but you can explore, you can learn, you can try to develop your knowledge on these sorts of things and figure out what the universe in the game actually is, instead of limiting yourself to the confines of what you think is right. But I understand what you're trying to say here in saying, but if anything is right, then that means anything is wrong, and all wrong things that I think are wrong are equally correct to do. I can see exactly where you're leading this, but so far, what you're saying doesn't sound bad. I can see how it can be twisted to bad, though.
Can you picture that? That's what it's like if there's no God.
Are you sure you're not an atheist, ally?
Everyone has their own opinion about what's good or bad, but there's no way to say who's right. It's like everyone liking different flavors of ice cream. Just because you like strawberry doesn't mean everyone should. In a world without God, there's no way to say for sure that something is good or evil.
Nah, sorry, I'm not a fan of strawberry ice cream. I like mint chocolate chip. Sorry, is that wrong of me? Right, so I'm just going to assume now that this is the bad idea, that no matter what you say, whether it be murder, stealing, or helping an old lady cross the road, they're all equally right because they are the same sorts of things, being like different flavours of ice cream. And there's no way, because there's no one up there judging you, to say whether something's good or bad. So all things can both be equally good and equally bad, whether it be helping a lady across the road or murdering her instead. Which is obviously not true. Your actions in life are not flavours of ice cream. Your actions in a game are different to actions in real life. If I see an old lady crossing the road, and she may need assistance, and I go over to her and offer that assistance, that is not good because a creator told me that it was, or that I believed a creator would smile at me when I do so. That's good because the old lady would appreciate the effort, and I'm happy to help. But if I were to go over and murder her, then she probably wouldn't appreciate that. She probably wouldn't like that at all, and I have some form of empathy to understand that experiencing that sort of action done to you would be bad. It would hurt. And I wouldn't want that done to me. Why is that so difficult to understand? The only reason I can think of is that you, yourself, lack empathy. And considering the amount of theists who say this argument, is it just theists who lack empathy to understand this? Let me use the same scenario, but put it this way. The only two individual beings involved in that is me and the old lady, whether I help her or whether I hinder her. Whether our outcomes are positive emotions or outward positivity, that's what judges something to be good or bad. The two people involved in the actions. And if there are more people involved in the actions, then we must take into consideration their thoughts on the matter.
Everything just is as it is without any meaning behind it. But if God exists, then God's nature and commands give us a clear guide to do what's good.
Sure, yeah, everything is as it is. As I said, if the end of the exchange between me and that old lady are positive outcomes, then that's good. But if it isn't, then it's bad. And if I ask and she says no, then the end result is neutral. The only thing I can see being used against this is, I don't know, someone being addicted to drugs and needing help to get off it, but unwilling to help themselves. So they need someone to take over and make the decision for them. But in truth, they need the free will to decide for themselves. You taking charge of their life is not good. If they give you permission to even, restrain them so they couldn't get access to drugs, then you've had their permission and that's their free will. But God doesn't give clear instructions on these. Religious books may try to guideline some things, but they certainly don't cover everything. And that's part of the problem with good and bad, or good and evil. Not everyone can decide exactly what is good or evil, even when using those books.
For instance, God teaches us to love others, which helps us see why being kind and fair is good.
That's one of the differences though, isn't it? I didn't need to read your book to know that. I don't need God to tell me that I need to show people respect and love them for simply existing.
And why being selfish or mean is bad. The idea here is pretty straightforward. God decides what is good based on the fact that He is good Himself.
And yet God is spaceless and timeless and therefore can't interact with us to tell us those laws. No matter who we are, no matter what we do, we have no idea what He thinks is good and bad. So at the end of the day, we still have to base it on whether God doesn't exist, even if we believe in Him or not.
Think of it like this. If a band sounds just like their live show when you listen to their recorded music, that's a great recording. Similarly, the closer what we do is to how God would do things, the better it is.
No wonder a lot of extremist Christians are climate deniers. It's good to have another great flood, isn't it? Mass extinction for everyone. God did it, so it's okay. That's your moral law, isn't it? That's literally what you just said. What God does makes it okay to be more like Him. He caused the Great Flood, which would have killed millions of people and countless animals. And even then, I'm not done with making you regret what you just said there. Because once again, the theists in the debate take it too far. But I'll save it for then.
But if someone believes that there is no God, which is what atheism is about.
On the bright side, there is at least that one thing that he does get right. That is literally it. That's what atheism is. I don't believe in your God, or any others. So at least there's that.
Then they don't have a perfect standard for deciding what's right and wrong.
Agreed. There is no perfect standard on this. Not for atheists, and not for theists. The Bible may try to cover some things, but it doesn't cover it all. And for some of the things in the Bible, people like me would say that it's evil. Any form of killing, in my eyes, is evil.
Who would tell us how to act if there's no God? Well, nobody.
What, not even yourself? You can't make up your own mind on what's good or bad. So when you see an old lady who's attempting to cross the road, but you can tell that she's in potential danger, your first thought isn't necessarily to help her. You could end up thinking, maybe I should just push her. She won't have to worry about it ever again. Are you seriously telling me that you can't think for yourself and you need to imagine someone of higher power just to be able to tell you to help someone else?
For people who don't believe in God, humans are just a part of nature, like animals that evolved. And animals don't really think about right or wrong.
Most animals are in survival mode, so they kind of have to react or be killed. So I don't really think they get much of a chance to think of what's good and bad. But somehow, even within their feral nature, even within the world of survival, things like mice actually show empathy. If a mouse sees another mouse trapped, it will help it escape, even when there's no reward. When a turtle or tortoise is overturned and lying on its back struggling to get up, another tortoise will come over and help it. There is no need to do it, other than the idea that they may one day be in that situation and the other may help them as well. So it would be good to save that mouse or the turtle. Also, have you never had a dog? Even before you start telling a dog off, it feels guilty. There is that viral video of Denver the guilty dog. He looks like he's smiling, but you can tell it's guilt that's going through him. He's not cheekily smiling there, knowing that you think it's funny. That's the knowledge of right and wrong in an animal.
A cat isn't doing something bad when it catches a mouse. It's just being a cat.
Well, yes, it is just being a cat, and if it's a wild cat or a stray, then it has to do that, otherwise it dies, which is also bad. And I find it strange you're using that as an example because you believe that your God created that cat to have the instinct to hunt the mouse. And if you think it's evil, your God did that. However, if that was my cat, I wouldn't own a cat, I really don't like cats, but still, if that was my cat and I saw it attacking a mouse, I'd tell it off. Teach it right and wrong. Because the cat doesn't need to do it because I'll feed the cat. It's my responsibility to feed the cat, and therefore the cat shouldn't be out there trying to hunt other animals.
If there's no God, some might say we should see human actions the same way, that nothing is really right or wrong.
Which sounds much more accurate than what you're trying to say your God has with a moral law. Although I would still somewhat disagree with the statement. For example, killing is bad, because the result from one side is bad.
But here's the catch. Things like fairness, goodness, and justice do seem very real to us.
Of course they are, but they're not tangible, but they are real.
Every time you feel something is unfair or wrong, like someone being mean or cheating, or if someone came and just stole your wallet, you're really saying you believe there's a right way to act.
I don't know if there's a specific right way to act in a sort of totalitarian way, but certain acts are bad, yes, of course they are, and certain acts are good. Like I said, positive outcomes and negative outcomes, things that people can benefit from, or things that people are hindered from, are just progressing towards the ideas of good and bad. And I didn't need a God to get there. I used my own mind, I used logic. I thought about it. I can't just stop thinking and let God do that thinking for me, because he doesn't. He won't make that decision for me.
Without God, we wouldn't have a solid basis for all these feelings about right and wrong that seem to apply to everyone, everywhere.
But what is it that actually seems to apply to everyone, everywhere? I mean, me and you may both agree that cannibalism is wrong, but not everyone agrees with that. There are tribal people out there who will cannibalize you, and that's okay because they need food. I wouldn't want to be the person they're trying to eat, but in my view, it is obviously wrong. In their view, they're just hungry, and they want to stop feeling hungry. They probably don't really care about my feelings on the matter, but you're the one who said that these things apply to everyone, everywhere. But clearly, that's not the case.
So what does this all mean?
Well, so far from this video, absolutely nothing.
Well, there's something called objective morality and objective moral values. Objective morality means there is a standard outside of us which exists for what is good and what is bad. An example might be for torturing infants for fun.
And this is where the theists go too far, and yes, I did censor a word out there. The mere fact that you think atheist equals no God, therefore they can do those horrendous things, is absolutely vile and disgusting. What you are doing is wrong and evil. You are putting a load of people in one collective group just simply because they don't agree with your opinions, and then saying they must commit the heinousest of crimes. And the fact that you can say it so calmly. But remember when I told you you were going to regret something you said earlier? Well, let's take a look at that, shall we?
Similarly, the closer what we do is to how God would do things, the better it is.
Oh, and what was it you said that the atheists do because they don't believe in God and we need to be more like God? God wouldn't do those things, was it? What was it? It was...
An example might be for torturing infants for fun.
Right, so those two things were your example of what's evil, something you could think of that was one of the most evil things you could think of, right? We'll start with the first one, but strangely this was easy to find. It's in the same two paragraphs, right next to each other. The King James Bible, 2 Samuel 12. This was a punishment for David doing an evil act. Thus said the Lord, Behold, I will raise up evil against thee out of thine own home, and I will take thy wives before thine eyes, and give them unto thy neighbour, and he shall lie with thy wives in the sight of the sun. I can't be sure, but it doesn't sound like those wives are giving consent. And we'll continue the line just to be more clearly. For thou didst this secretly, but I will do this thing before all of Israel, and before the sun. So not only was it unconsensual, but it was in front of everyone. There must have been many witnesses to this. And as for your second claim, in the beginning of the next paragraph, This is the same part. King James Bible, 2 Samuel 12. And the Lord struck the child that Uriah's wife bare unto David, and it was very sick. God made an innocent baby sick because of his father's sins, which I'm pretty sure the Bible also disagrees with. So which is it? Again, your moral law is inconsistent here. And just to make it even more clear that it wasn't just like a single little bit and then the baby got better, skipping a few lines, which is just filler, and it came to pass on the 7th day that the child died. God punished a baby for something his father did, made it sick for 7 days, and the baby died. God tortured a baby to death. These are things you claimed an atheist would do because they have no moral law, and then claim your Bible is your moral law, and yet it's in there saying we're allowed to do those things. Because you said we must be more like God. No wonder you don't understand why atheists can't have morality. If you truly believe this, you don't have any at all.
To say that objective morality exists is to say that these sort of things are wrong, regardless of our culture and regardless of our laws.
I do think they're wrong, and I'm sure you do too, but yet what you just said seems to allow it as a moral law. Welcome to atheism, a place where you know it's not okay to do those things.
This says that there are things that are right and things that are wrong, again, like for torturing babies for fun. These things would be considered wrong regardless of our culture or where we come from or how we grew up or our personal opinions. Does this objective morality, this right and wrong, actually exist? What do you think?
Of course it exists, from a human perspective. Doesn't require a god. And by the sounds of it, I don't want his input on morality. Because the things you think are so evil, things that only atheists could be able to do, are things your God has done according to your own holy textbook. Also, I know I read from the King James Version of the Bible, but Christians have so many different variations of Bibles, I cannot look at them all. But every single one I have looked at, that story is in there, maybe worded differently, but the events still happen.
If they are truly wrong, if they are wrong outside of just our opinions or what our society says is wrong, if they are wrong outside of what our laws say, then you would be saying that there is a standard of right and wrong which exists outside of us. And you would also be saying that that standard of right and wrong outside of us actually exists.
That existence is the effects of what we do. The way we act can be positive or negative. It can hinder or benefit our society. It can benefit us. It can benefit our family. It can benefit social circles. It can benefit the entirety of the species. Or it can do the opposite. That's where it exists. Also, none of that requires a god.
And if you are saying that, then the question is, who set that standard up?
Me. Well, for myself that is anyway. Other people have different opinions. Like you do, from me.
And this question points to the existence of God.
No, it doesn't.
This is critically important to understand.
The only way it points to a god is if you're asking who set up that moral code or moral law. But why aren't you asking what set up that moral law? Why do we think that way? It doesn't have to be a who. The reason you're asking who is because you're biased and already believe that there is a god. You already have an answer and you're trying to search for the questions. You're making the question fit the answer, not finding evidence and then concluding from that.
So what I am saying is, if objective moral values and objective morality actually exist, that proves that God, who put that there, actually exists.
Well, now it's not just your morals I'm questioning, it's your reasoning and understanding, and your ability to logically think about what you've read. If you've read the Bible at all. Because by the sounds of it, you haven't. As if you did, you wouldn't be following it.
So if there is even one thing that is objectively wrong, that proves that God exists. So that would mean that objective moral values do exist.
You see, I find this ironic. You claim you only need one piece of evidence, one tiny piece of evidence, that somewhat matches just to make this claim true. Any other pieces of evidence, even if they go against it, don't matter. But that one piece of evidence that fits, that proves everything. And yet, on your channel, I can see You've got videos of the bombardier beetle is a problem for evolution, why fossil records do not support evolution. And there's mountains of evidence for those, tons and tons of it, and yet not a single one of those convinces you, but one single tiny piece of evidence here, because it supports your views and your opinions, oh, that's perfectly fine.
Now for the moral argument. It is a 3-part argument and goes like this. First part, if God does not exist, then objective moral values and duties, doing things you ought to do not exist. Second part, objective moral values do exist. And the third part, therefore, God exists.
You see, for this moral argument to actually function, I would need to accept the first statement, which I clearly don't. And if this guy ends up watching this video, and you don't understand why by now, then restart the video and listen.
So again, if there is even one thing that is objectively wrong, no matter what culture you were raised in, or no matter who you are, if those things are actually objectively wrong, if anything can be considered objectively wrong, that proves that God exists.
It's basically the paradox of evidence. All ravens are black. If there were no ravens, there would be no black. I can put YouTube in dark mode, which is black, therefore ravens must exist. The paradox is suggesting that just because YouTube's dark mode is black, like ravens are, seems to imply that I have learned evidence about ravens from nothing other than YouTube's dark mode. Therein lies the paradox. The statement is pretty much made to try to confuse people who don't believe, and to reconfirm people that do believe.
Well, someone might give a counter argument and say that society is the one that dictates something being right or wrong. But some societies love their neighbors, and some societies eat their neighbors. Are they both just as right? Did Hitler do anything wrong during the Holocaust? Not if there's no God.
Again, this is really bad, severe misinformation. Especially when you're using Hitler, you really need to start doing your research. Theists seem to like using Hitler, despite the fact that Hitler went to church regularly. And I'll admit, the church did not agree with him. Just like many of the German citizens in the German society at the time, which this guy's claiming they thought Hitler was right, which is completely wrong. Hitler is a good example as to why having one person in power is a bad idea. And earlier you also said that the moral law applies to everyone, everywhere. And then you just provided evidence against that idea. Make up your mind.
Again, if there's no God, then who says that what Hitler did was wrong? An honest atheist cannot say anything is objectively right or wrong.
Human beings have the ability to decide what is right and wrong. Some people do things that are wrong. Most people can see that.
Because according to an atheist's worldview, there is no single thing that can be considered actually objectively wrong. Apart from the existence of God, it is more so just a preference. It's like, I prefer not torturing babies for fun.
Well, I'm glad you prefer not doing that. Oh wait, you said that about the atheists, didn't you? My bad. You see, most people just don't need to worry about that because they don't think about doing it. Because they don't need a god to tell them what's right or wrong. The fact you think you do is very concerning, especially when your book is saying it's okay.
But according to an atheist framework, the one who tortures is no more wrong than the person who helps people their whole lives.
Again, that's something religious people say when it comes to things like hell. Someone who does good things throughout their life but doesn't believe and denies the existence of your God will end up in your hell. But someone who is a bad person but then repents their sins because they believe in God doesn't have to go to hell and be punished for it.
According to an honest atheist, there is no difference between Mother Teresa and Adolf Hitler.
Mother Teresa is female, Adolf Hitler is male. All joking aside though, Mother Teresa was dedicated to helping the poorest and sickest communities, in which I believe she also earned the Nobel Peace Prize. So I'm sure she affected many people's lives in a very positive manner. Whereas Adolf Hitler put loads of people in concentration camps where they were poorly treated and then killed millions of people, which probably very negatively affected many people's lives. I didn't need God to answer that question, but yet both Mother Teresa and Hitler were both theists.
Again, if someone says something is actually morally and objectively wrong, they are also telling you, voluntarily or not, that they believe a God exists.
And if that is all the evidence you need to say for sure that somebody else believes in God, no matter what they tell you, and also be shown the amount of evidence for evolution, and deny it, that the only thing you care about is your own opinion. Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, let me know. If you have anything more to add, feel free to check out the comments, then let me know and I'll read them there. But if you want more from me, there are 2 videos on screen right now, and pick one, and I'll see you there.